I would now like to call the November 18th, 2020 Longmont Sustainability Advisory Board meeting to order. Could we please start with a roll call?
Yes. We have Kate Collardson.
Present.
Adam Reed.
Present.
Charles Musgrave.
Present.
And Jim Metcalf.
Present.
And we got word from Mary Lynn and Violetta that they are not well today, so they will not be joining us.
Okay,
Then
do we have
hold on one second.
Sorry.
Staff members, we have Annie Noble.
I'm here.
Francie will be joining us later. Tim Ellis.
Present.
Atra Nusrat.
Present.
And we have Debbie Seidman
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
and Ann Lutz. Oh, she can't unmute, sorry. And Heather McIntyre is here also. And Polly also sends her regrets. She's at another meeting this week, so she won't be able to be here as well today.
Okay. Do we have a quorum?
We do have a quorum.
All right. Then the next item on our agenda is to approve the minutes of the last meeting. Would anybody like to make a motion there?
Cannot because I wasn't here.
Oh, right.
I move that we approve the minutes from the last board meeting.
I will second that. All in favor? Okay. At this point, I would like to open it up for the public invited to be heard. Each person wishing to speak will be unmuted to speak one at a time. When it is your turn to speak, please state your name and address for the record, and you will have 3 minutes for comment, and I will keep time.
All right, first on our list, we have Doe Kelly.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, I am Doe Kelly of Barberry Drive in Longmont. So I wanted to say a couple of days ago, I sent an email to the city council, which I've now asked Heather to forward to each of you for the links. I'd like to read a bit of the letter now because it has to do with known smart meter fire hazards. I believe that it rather contradicts Mr. Schmidt's statement at the City Council's October 20th Smart Meter AMI study session that statistically smart meter fire risks are insignificantly low. These are quotes from the PDF report linked to in the email that I hope you will all receive. And I quote, Fire Chief Dwayne Roddy testified to the Michigan House Energy Committee in 2017 that he watched a smart meter ignite an arc at his home from a surge. The electricity kept flowing and arcing, melting the lines to his house, and didn't stop until the transformer on the pole blew, and then the fuse on the pole finally tripped. In Pacific Grove, California, PG&E crews shut off power to repair a transformer. When they reconnected the power, they heard a popping sound and a nearby building's smart meter and panel caught fire. The situation is similar to the 60-cent bolt that fails and brings down an airplane. If an overage comes from the street or from the meter, the building's circuit breakers will not trip. Circuit breakers in a building only protect from inside electrical problems. End of quote. And another quote. Branches and trees fell on lines in the California North Bay fires, causing contact between higher voltage and lower voltage lines. Lines caught fire from the higher voltage current. This high voltage current was flowing into homes, blowing out the varistors. Automatic restarters kept re-energizing the lines, keeping this high voltage current flowing and also sending repeated surges down lines into buildings, intensifying the problem, end of quote. And this has happened in other places as well. As I said to City Council in my email, I would task each of you to peruse carefully this information that I've sent to you as part of any considered advice you give to council as to whether or not you still believe it's in the highest interest of the Longmont citizenry to force a smart meter on every home and business. The fire hazard is but one of several troubling aspects of smart meters that I and other peoples via the public invited to be heard at City Council and here have raised. I would also direct you to a recent legal development in Pennsylvania to do with smart meters, where the quote, State Commonwealth Court last month determined that the 12-year-old law requiring utilities to furnish smart meter technology by 2023 contained nothing to require every customer to endure involuntary exposure to radio emissions, end of quote. This is in the email I sent you. What we need here, instead of wireless smart meters of smart cities and 5G with the Internet of Things and all the myriad problems associated, are safe wired technologies, wisdom cities that use the best practices from history. Think solar orientation of homes for passive heating and cooling, as with earthships, sustainable materials like hempcrete, and I wholeheartedly agree with Mary Lynn and second her vision that public banking is a must to fund not only the Longmont City government's own sustainability goals, but to make low interest loans available to homeowners and businesses that want to follow suit. And I thank you for your time.
Thanks so much. Okay.
And next we have Leah Yancey, who wants to introduce herself.
Good afternoon, everybody. Nice to see everyone on the screen. My name is Leah Yancey. I work for Boulder County as a senior sustainability specialist. I'm just joining today because I was really interested in the topic that staff will be updating the board on some of your grant-funded projects through the Boulder County 2020 Sustainability Matching Grant Program. I oversee that program, and it's a real pleasure to collaborate with municipalities, and just excited to hear how it's been going. So thanks for letting me join in your meeting.
Thanks for being here.
And then we have one more comment from Virginia Black, or we know her as Ginny Black. She said, "Dear Sustainability Advisory Board members, I'm sorry that I'm not able to join you today to make the scheduled presentation for Citizens Climate Lobby. A dental emergency last week interfered with that plan. The offending molar has been removed and bone grafting completed. The extraction was a bit complicated, but healing seems to be going smoothly. Thank you for your understanding, and I look forward to speaking with you in January or February. Sincerely, Ginny Black." Longmont chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby.
Great. Thank you. Does anyone have any revisions to the agenda or documents that they want to submit?
No.
Okay. All right. Then we will move on to the next section, which is general business. I will ask board members to hold comments and questions until the end of each presentation after the staff has finished presenting. So first up is Debbie Seidman with an update on energy benchmarking for commercial buildings. The floor is yours.
All right, good afternoon. Everyone can see the presentation and can see me. It's nice to meet those of you that I have not met previously, but I believe you all know that we have started doing some benchmarking work here in Fort Collins. I actually did meet with City Council back in May, and this is an update. This is basically an update that I'm going to give to City Council again in December, but I am also giving this update to this board at the same time. So to introduce myself, my name is Debbie Seidman. I work for Longmont Power and Communications. I am in the Energy Strategies and Solutions Group. I am an engineer and a project manager, and I primarily work on energy saving initiatives. I do want to clarify, there's no action today for the board. This is just to provide information. Next slide, please. So you all are familiar with benchmarking. I believe there's been discussion amongst this board, and I will just provide a brief refresher as to what that is. I will give you some information from a demonstration project we held in Longmont in 2020. I'll let you know that we are going to move to expand that program to a voluntary program in 2021. I'll explain some benefits from benchmarking and then also just give you a wrap up of current actions. And by benchmarking, I should say that I do mean benchmarking of energy use in buildings. Primarily, we're looking at commercial buildings at this time. Next slide. Thank you. So what is building benchmarking? Well, if you're not familiar with the concept, everyone knows that there is such a thing as a fuel efficiency rating for a vehicle. That would be miles per gallon. If you're looking to purchase a vehicle, you may use this information to help you determine what vehicle to purchase. So similarly, you can get a score for a building. You can get an Energy Star score. And this is a hypothetical example of a building that has a score of 71 on a scale of 1 to 100. The higher the number, the better the score. And another way to think of this is you can think this is somewhat similar to an Energy Star appliance, which also most people are familiar with. And basically, we're trying to give a measurement. It's the old adage of you can't manage what you don't measure. The objective of benchmarking energy use in buildings is to better understand the energy use and encourage building owners to take additional action to save energy. And essentially, the less energy we use, the easier it will be for Longmont to get to our renewable energy goal of 100% renewable energy by the year 2030. That's a resolution that was passed by City Council. Next slide, please. So in 2020, we held a demonstration project with commercial buildings, 20,000 square feet and larger. We recruited buildings to participate, and this is an example of some of the marketing materials we used to recruit those buildings. And the project was to gain a better understanding of the EPA's benchmarking tool and see if this was going to be useful and anything that we could learn best practices or maybe what didn't work so well if we did want to roll this out on a larger scale. Next slide, please. So after recruiting some building owners and property managers, we did provide some training. Again, this is just a small snapshot of the training, but there was a lot of one-on-one instruction. We provided a written guide, and we also directed customers to the EPA's training materials. Next slide, please. So who participated? Well, here are some examples. Again, we had 10 large commercial buildings and 10 municipal buildings that were benchmarked. This is the relatively new hospital for UC Health, Longs Peak Hospital, and it is a fairly large facility in our community. Next slide, please. Safeway participated. We had 2 schools from St. Vrain Valley School District that were benchmarked, as well as the Honda North America Data Center. Next slide, please. Circle Graphics, who was a manufacturing facility in town, benchmarked their building, and also we had First Bank Building on North Main. There were additional participants in addition to what I'm showing. And it just turned out everyone was really a great partner to work with. They were all really good. I appreciated working with them and vice versa. Next slide, please. So how did we move forward with the demonstration project? Well, to benchmark your building, a building owner is required to self-report their information. They have to put information about their building into an EPA software. It's called Energy Star Portfolio Manager. And that software is secure, there's no charge, and it's online. And out of the software, after you input your information about your building and utility bill use, you receive an Energy Star score. So here's an example. Eagle Crest Elementary received an Energy Star score for their energy use in 2019 of 60. They have an Energy Star score of 60. And again, that's on a scale of 1 to 100. 50 is average. Greater than 50 is better than average. There are many things that can affect the score. The building envelope, so your windows, ceiling around the windows, type of insulation, your heating and cooling equipment, how many people are in the building, computers and other plug load or manufacturing equipment in your building, refrigeration equipment in a grocery store is another example. Now, I want to clarify that the software itself doesn't save energy. It's a tool that we are using to help create awareness to energy use. And we're hoping that regardless of the score, building owners would take additional action to improve their score. This would be action to save energy. And this could be modifying habits of the occupants, modifying building controls, maybe adding more energy efficient heating or cooling equipment, upgrading your lighting, etc. Next slide, please. After we did benchmarking of the 20 buildings, we did a deep dive of the data. We hired a third-party consultant, the RMH group, to look at the input and the outputs in quite a bit of detail. This is more detail than would typically done for basic benchmarking, but we wanted to make sure we really understood the software. And it was also a nice benefit for the building owners that participated with us. It also gave us, turns out it gave us a really good opportunity to have additional interaction with our customers. Next slide, please. And then as we're finishing up the benchmarking, we're performing formal feedback interviews with the customers to find out what was beneficial, was it worth their time, what worked well, what didn't work well. But in addition to those formal feedback interviews, there just turns out there was a lot of informal discussion, particularly when we were either asking them to complete some information or when we were doing this detailed data verification. And it turns out that the demonstration project really was good for building relationships. This was kind of an unplanned benefit, but in spending time with our customers, we developed these relationships further. And then we got their attention. Many of the customers came away from the program with the importance of actually wanting to do more. Next slide, please. So here's some results. Here's some Energy Star numbers from the 10 commercial buildings that participated. We had a variety of types of building and also quite a variety of ages of buildings. And as a result, you see quite a range of scores. And what I mean by type of building, I did give an example of an elementary school. So that school was benchmarked against similar type buildings, meaning other K through 12 schools also in the same climate region. Next slide, please. Now, again, we in Longmont want to use this as a tool. We see this as a tool. We are not so much focused on the number. However, regardless, we had some buildings with very high scores. If you get an Energy Star score for your building of 75 or greater, you are qualified to be Energy Star certified. This does take some additional steps and some paperwork, fairly simple, but it does take that additional work. And 2 of our buildings are proceeding with becoming Energy Star certified. That's Honda North America Data Center and Silver Creek High School. And once they do become certified, they can receive a sticker for their window or a plaque, something like you see here. Next slide, please. Then in addition to the customer buildings, city staff benchmarked 10 municipal buildings. I worked actually with facilities management in the city and a lot of department managers at various buildings to get information that I needed to help benchmark the buildings, and I appreciate their help. Next slide, please. Here are the results from benchmarking of the municipal buildings that we benchmarked. And here's an example. You see the Development Services Center has a score of 60. Initially, I was surprised to see that score. That's an old building. I wasn't expecting it to have a very high score, but it's 60, which is above average. I looked into it further, and it turns out that they had a major upgrade in 2007 where they added insulation values to the walls and the roof. So that is why they had a good score. You'll also see there are several NAs. Not all building types can receive a score yet from the EPA. The EPA is rolling out additional building types over time. But regardless, they can still get an energy use value, which I show in the second column. Next slide, please. So there are a lot of benefits to benchmarking. And for this early demonstration project, we did give a lot of education and support, and I was available for some one-on-one work that may not occur for a larger encompassing program. We also plan to move to a voluntary program in 2021, and that similar amount of education and support would remain available. Also, for benchmarking in general, the benefit to customers is they will hopefully do some resulting projects to save energy and save costs. And For example, we are already getting questions about follow-up projects from Safeway and the First Bank building. Safeway wants to work on the refrigeration equipment, the refrigeration cases. They're also looking at upgrading their lighting. First Bank building similarly would like to get funding to upgrade their lighting and their HVAC equipment. They already were doing that, but they're hoping that this can be a persuasive tool to help get the funding to do those projects. Also, benchmarking can be used to help market a space. This is done a lot in the commercial real estate business, where you have a large facility and you're leasing space to tenants. So a potential tenant would know if there's a good Energy Star score. That means the building's more energy efficient and their utility bills will be less. This also helps marketing. If you're a business owner, this may help you to attract and retain employees. There are a lot of employees that want to work for an employer that participates in these types of programs. Next slide, please. So for 2020, we plan to expand this program to include all commercial buildings that are 20,000 square feet and greater in the city of Longmont. There are approximately 280 buildings that would fit in this category, and we're hoping that we get a good percentage of those to participate and benefit from the program. Now, why are we selecting this group of buildings? Well, it's a relatively small number of buildings for the city, but those are the big utility users, the big the buildings that consume a lot of energy. So we can target a smaller number of buildings and get a much bigger impact. Next slide, please. Some additional benefits. Benchmarking of energy use in buildings supports the City Council resolution for 100 renewable energy by 2030. I mentioned that earlier. Cities that have participated in building energy benchmarking have estimated savings to be 2.4% annually. The EPA has also provided that number. And then this also coordinates with other city programs, and the Climate Action Task Force shows a strong support for benchmarking, and it lists it fairly high on their list of recommendations. Next slide, please. So to kind of summarize our current and future actions for the demonstration project, we are still in the process of consolidating the feedback and using that to help form what we do moving forward. We will have a voluntary program in 2021, and that includes a lot of customer education and outreach. That actually will begin this year. We are scheduled to do a panel discussion with some of our participants in the demonstration project with the Chamber of Commerce on December 1st. So anyone is welcome to attend that. Actually, that will be virtual. And then I plan to come back and report to City Councilor. My team will in 2021 and give them some updates. And that's it. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions? Jim.
Thank you for that. That was very interesting. I was just curious. You said that a score of 50 is an average building for whatever type of building it is. I understand that, you know. Is that something that moves with time, like as technologies improve, or is that like if you score a 50 today and you come back in 10 years and you haven't changed anything, will you get a 50 again?
Okay, that's a good question. And it is similar type buildings, and it's in the same climate region. So the information is essentially weather normalized by combining with similar buildings in the region, and it's benchmarked against an average. And yes, that does change. That comes from a pool of buildings that the EPA surveys, and I believe they update that about once every 4 years. So what I understand is, I think it was 2012 and 2016 possibly that those numbers were changed. So the most recent update, a lot of buildings, their score maybe went down, because since then there were newer buildings built with a more stringent energy code. And so they were disappointed to see their numbers go down. So
thank you so much.
Correct.
Yeah, I think Adam had a question, and then Charles.
Yeah, thanks, Debbie, for the presentation. I had two questions. For my first question, my understanding is these scores are based on certain characteristics for a building. And so how long does it take for a person in that building to fill out the forms required to input that into the software, like for the characteristics? And my second question is related to that is, there any way to streamline that and make that so that not only commercial buildings can use it, but also residential buildings?
Okay, that's a good question. Another category that can be benchmarked are multi-family residential facilities. The type of information that's input is square footage, a number of occupants, number of computers, and then it might depend on your type of building. Like for a hospital, it's number of MRI units. The EPA tries to make this a very easy to use software, and they really only want it to take an hour or two to input the first time. But in my opinion, you do have to become familiar with the software. And the larger buildings tend to have a staff of facilities people, so they have the information. If you don't have that, then it might take a little bit longer to get the information. So it could actually take several hours the first time. The other major item that you input is 12 months of utility bill data, electrical and natural gas. You can also benchmark your water usage. So you need to get utility bill information. For Longmont, we will provide that to our customers for the electrical. And then for the natural gas, if they're an Excel customer, they can manually input that from their bills or work with Excel to do an automatic upload process. But once you do that the first year, if there aren't changes to your building, all you have to do is put in the utility bill data for future years. Now we're finding, unfortunately, with the pandemic, a lot of, for example, retail, their hours changed this year. So you have to put in operating hours. They now have to change their building profile. But that's a good point. I've actually been speaking with Excel. And one thing that we're trying to do is have staff like myself available that we can help if there are questions. You can also, there's a help desk through the APA, but for the demonstration project customers, I actually sat down with some of them, either, well, one was in person and some were virtual over a web type communication, but I actually benchmarked it with them to help them get familiar with the software. So anything I can do to make it easier for them is something that we actually want to do. Now, once we roll this out, it becomes larger and larger. We'll need additional people to do that. But it's a fair question, and it's something we're working towards.
So hi, Debbie. Thanks for that overview. That was very good. I had a question about whether there was more granular data that would be provided to the different entities so that they know maybe what to target and what specifically are areas where they have the most opportunities for improvement versus, I wasn't sure if it was just the overall score or if there was more like, you get an A in math and you got a C in,
Right.
in music, you should work on your music.
The main output is the Energy Star score. There are dozens of metrics that you can pull out of the software, so you can get greenhouse gas emission numbers. There's nice graphs that shows the natural gas use monthly over time for the history of the building, or electrical use monthly over time, and you can look at that, and you can look at that graph and say, is that curve similar every year? Whereas I have more heating or more cooling in the summer, more heating in the winter, for example. A lot of large buildings actually don't cool much in the winter. They have so much internal load. So you can look at that to get some high level information, but either if you're a very astute building owner, you might get some information out of that, or you could hire a consultant to look at that for you, but it doesn't necessarily go into a lot of detail. But again, you can look and say, wow, is my gas? You can also compare against national metrics. So is my gas use really high compared to another school, or is my electrical really high? And there, I've heard stories where companies have found problems. Like there was a building in Denver that was a high-rise building, and they had snow melt. So under the concrete, you can have electrical or hot water that causes snow melt. They had their snow melt on all year. They didn't know that, but they discovered that because they had a benchmarking number that was high. But it takes some work. Honestly, it would take some work to dig into that and understand that.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Thank you.
Jim.
I just have one more. What's up with First Bank? They got a score of 8.
I'm sorry?
What's up with First Bank? They got a score of 8. Is that right?
Oh, you weren't supposed to notice that. They were such a good partner, such a good partner. And they actually have a bit of energy use because they have cell towers on the roof and a kind of a data center that goes with those cell towers. However, you can compare it against other buildings that have a similar use. So they're not comparing that as a building with or without the cell towers. Again, with that consultant, we really dove deep into that. And all we can figure is it is a relatively older building. It was built in 1976, I believe. And it's being compared to newer buildings that are built under a more stringent energy code. They have replaced 2 out of 7 of their rooftop units, and they're hoping to replace more, and they haven't done any lighting upgrades. And again, he's hoping to use this as data to help get some funding. In talking to some of our, well, it's too much detail, talking to some of the large retailers, they have so much money to do projects, either energy efficiency or process improvements, and they have to compete against other states for that money. So it's hard to compete against places that have much higher utility costs. We have such low fees that it makes it kind of harder, but they really want that to be higher. And I even had the consultant look at that. So another thing is they don't have a lot of people in that building. So they have a certain amount of energy, but it's a lot of attorneys and CPAs. So they have nice big suites. So they're using a certain amount of energy, but not a lot of people are taking advantage of the heating and the cooling. Not that I'm saying they should fill it with a bunch of cubicles. So.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I do have one more question. I'm just curious about reactions from the participants.
Well, they volunteered. So of course, they had interest in it or they wouldn't have volunteered. One of these was a property manager. And something I failed to mention, but you may be aware of this, 34 cities in the US and 3 states have benchmarking requirements or benchmarking ordinance. At this time, we're strictly voluntary. But those 3 cities, or of those cities, that includes Denver, Boulder, and the city of Fort Collins. So one of these was a property manager, and he thought, well, if other cities have a requirement locally, we won't be long before we have a requirement also. That may or may not happen, but he thought this was a really good opportunity to go ahead and get started. And he had a lot of, again, individual attention to help him set up his building. And he may or may not be a fan of benchmarking, but if it's required, I might as well go ahead and do it. And then we just developed a lot of good relationships. And again, like Safeway came into this, and they're one of the ones that said, it's really hard for us to get money to do energy projects in Colorado. But they came away with this, and now they actually are much more serious about doing a lighting project. They got some information to work with their corporate facility. So we developed a lot of good relationships. And then there was another large retailer that I think was a little hesitant. They just wanted to do the benchmarking be done and not to invest a lot of time. And eventually we convinced them that I was available to help and the consultant was available to help. And they actually, at the end, were very thankful. And that happened with more than one participant. So it kind of goes back to that question of how can you help streamline the process, and at least if we're available, that can help quite a bit. So, but and I know, I know not everyone might be a fan. So it's, again, we want to approach this as a tool.
Sure. Adam, I see you have a question, and let's make this the last one and then we'll move on.
Okay, sure. I'll make it quick. Is there any way to translate this energy score into cost savings? Like, I'm imagining sliding the number around and just seeing if you make it larger, say increase it by like some amount, how much would you save on average?
That's a good question. So, people benchmark their building for 2019. They might do 2020, 2021. You need a full year before you can go back and it's based on annual consumption. So you actually need a full year to see what you save. It's a mix of electrical energy and natural gas. So it's really hard to split that into how much you would save because of the 2 different rates. And then not everyone is an XL Energy customer. They also get their natural gas from other sources. So I would say, maybe you could do some kind of rule of thumb, but it's difficult because it's a combination of electrical and gas. And that will vary. A building with a lot of industrial use inside actually would need a lot less cooling than the First Bank building, for example. They just have solar load, so they're going to get hotter. No, I should say that wrong. They have a lot less. They would have a lot less they don't generate a lot of their own internal heat. So they're going to actually need a lot more natural gas to heat their building than like a manufacturing building would. So that's not so simple. It could be done though. Something to think about.
Yeah. Thanks again for your presentation. That was great.
Okay, thank you.
And now we will move on to the progress report on the 2020 sustainability tax efforts. Atara, the floor is yours.
Okay. You got it, Heather?
Is it showing?
Yeah, I'm seeing like 2 slides. That's okay. Can everybody see the slides?
Oh, let me share the other screen. Give me 1 second. I picked the wrong one. Sorry about that.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Well, thank everybody for inviting me back to present and to the board. My name is Atara Nazra. I'm the Sustainability Grant and Program Coordinator. I'm going to present an update of the current programs funded by the Sustainability Tax in 2020. So some of the slides you would have seen before, but I'll go through those fairly quickly. I'd also drill down into a few that I feel as though you might find of interest. And we also have Wayne Tomac from Community Services here. And I believe Francie Jaffe's also joined us, as they have more background on some of the projects I'll be presenting. And so perhaps after I presented, if you have further questions, they may be able to answer those as well. So go to the next slide, please, Heather. Yep, so we're going to present an update on the current projects. Next slide. And as you know, the sustainability tax mechanism was approved in 2016 to support sustainability infrastructure and programs. 2020 was the first year that this program was run, and we received $125,800 in grant. We provided $32,000 in city match, and that was our total budget. Next slide, please. So we funded 5 projects against that budget. The grant coordinator position, the sustainability program coordinator position, which focuses on residential programs, the sustainable neighborhood solutions program. And just to kind of qualify what that is, that's a multi-tiered, multi-year initiative to embed sustainability at a neighborhood level. The Women, Infant and Children's Farmers Market Program, which is a Boulder County funded program which supports local farmers and individuals who are affected by food insecurity. And the Carbon-Free Equitable Transportation Roadmap, for which we hired a consultant to do community outreach and provide a report. Next slide, please. So I'm going to drill down into these 2 positions first of all. Next slide. So in terms of the grant coordinator, so in fact both. So we combine both roles. So it's 50-50, 50% grant coordination, 50% sustainability. And I'm currently fulfilling those 2 roles. The position started at April 6th of this year. And with the grant roles, obviously one is applying for grants, assisting project managers in writing applications and submitting them, and also working with business services in public works and natural resources to support our internal grant management systems to optimize our applications going forward. For the program coordinator role, largely focusing on residential sustainability programs, which we'll go into, and communications and outreach for sustainability. That will, I think, expand more next year as we have a bit more bandwidth. So next slide, please, Heather. So in terms of grant coordination, since April of this year, I've supported 6 applications across the city. That's largely been in public works and natural resources, also working with LPC and the Department of Transportation. It's the equivalent of $1.6 million worth of grant dollars that we've actually applied for. And according to statistics, we have about 30% success rate. So that would equate to about $480,000 of grant dollars secured. In terms of supporting the actual grant management systems in the city, we've developed a survey and circulated that across key personnel in PW&R. And that's to really understand what are the current capacities, bandwidth, expertise of staff to actually write applications, submit them, etc. And the idea behind that is then we can then augment our systems in place and actually produce optimized grant applications going forward. And obviously part of the role is to support pre-award and post-award management. So next slide. So I've got 2 slides here going into a little bit more detail about what grants we've actually supported. So in May, we supported Button Rock Preserve application. This was to Colorado State Forestry Services. And that was really in aid of protecting forest and ecosystem health and watershed protection. We didn't get that award largely because the focus of the grant was really on wildland-urban interface and protecting neighborhoods and residents. And they really wanted a lot more residents being protected than what we included in the application. I had peripheral engagement in that because I was just onboarding. In June, worked with Tim Ellis, who's on this call, I believe. We worked with the Regional Air Quality Council to secure $6,000 for an EV charging station that will be located at LPC. And in July, worked with Phil Greenwald in transportation. This was to secure funding for the concrete barriers that you've seen over the summer along Main Street. We only got a partial award for that because Longmont was well ahead and actually implemented the program and had the concrete barriers installed before we could submit the application. So we obviously couldn't claim any expenses retroactively. In August, worked with a recovery office with Peter Gibbons, who led this effort, working with the LDDA and Parks and Natural Resources to try and come up with a project which combined our parks and open spaces and Main Street, connecting the Greenway corridors, really to try and offset some of the impact that staff were experiencing because of COVID and to maintain our outdoor spaces. Unfortunately, it was declined. And I think that was largely because there was perhaps too much focus on Main Street and it didn't totally fit GOCO priorities. In September, October, worked with LPC, PWNL, Ann Lutz, Tim Ellis, and John Gage to devise a program that would meet the renewable clean energy requirements for a DOLA application. The program was the Energy Mineral Impact Assessment Fund. We settled on a project that targets the wastewater treatment plant. So what we're looking at is replacing 2 of the current centrifugal blowers for high efficiency blowers in the wastewater treatment plant, which addresses the secondary treatment process. And what that will effectively do is by replacing these blowers with high efficiency blowers, we're going to save about 600,000 kilowatt hours of energy use per year. We're also looking at installing a solar rooftop and battery storage capacity, which will offset another 100,000 kilowatt hours per year of energy consumption. So the wastewater treatment plant itself accounts for about 30% of the city's footprint from all of the city-owned facilities. So this would be a really big win for the city if we can secure this. We do actually have a presentation that we've been invited to for this project I don't know if it's next week, but early December. So we're optimistic that this project will actually get at least partial funding. So you could go to the next slide. You will also obviously be aware of the sustainability tax proposals that we put forward for 2021. So I won't go into that because you're familiar with that. And then we just recently worked with wildland restoration volunteers who, I don't know if you know, moved to Longmont from Boulder recently. And they have a need to provide their volunteers with local projects, and the city has a need for people to conduct projects because of limitations in staff capacity because of COVID. So this has been a very nice partnership between the 2 organizations. We're looking at a combination of projects, and that includes Greenway Trail revitalization, work at Golden Ponds, where we're painting trees to prevent beaver damage, Lake McIntosh, where we're planting native trees and also adding 2 rock boat ramps, Sandstone Ranch, where volunteers will be collecting native seeds, and Dickens Farm, where I'm sure you're aware there are people that have been jumping off the bridge, and we want some safety provisions there, but also protecting the natural environment. So there's a combination of projects there. But what's very nice about this is we're really working closely with volunteers. And I think we have a very good chance of receiving an award. The program committee actually met yesterday, and the press release is going to be out this Friday. And we're optimistic that we will have received a partial award. The last project listed here is actually an application that Francie Jaffe submitted, I believe last year, but was awarded this year. So I was not involved in the application process, but I will be involved in post-award management. And I believe that was finalized in October. And this is a water conservation effort. We're installing AMR meters. This effort from the city started in 2012, and the grant was to finish the actual program. And once all residential and large analog meters are switched to AMR, we're estimating savings. Oh, hang on, I've lost my page. Estimating savings of about 321 million gallons of water per year. So it's another big contribution to reducing our environmental sustainable footprint. The project will be completed in 2023. So this is a summary of the work that's gone into the grant coordination side of this particular program, which was funded by the sustainability tax. So I won't go into this much detail with the others, but I thought you might appreciate the breadth of the kind of support we've been offering to the city. So if you could go to the next one, please. So in terms of program coordination, as I mentioned, the main focus is on residential programs, and so the Sustainable Opportunities Lifestyle and Leadership Program has really taken up the majority of this effort. It was funded by Boulder County in 2018, and the funding period ended August 2020 with extensions, which Boulder County kindly granted us. So we had an urgent need to actually launch the project, make it operational. So I was working very closely, have been working very closely with Wayne Tomac, the lead on this program, to get the program off the ground, market it, get the word out, do community outreach, and have houses actually included in the program. So the aim of this program is engaging residents, local residents in Longmont, to help partner with the city to achieve our sustainability goals. We want to inform people about the 10 sustainability topics in the sustainability plan. We have volunteers from the community, which we train. So they're local residents, and that's been a great feature of the program, because it's not city staff leading on the program, it's local residents leading on the program. They're the ones who go into homes, perform eco upgrades, and connect residents with information, resources, and potentially the local services that will help lower their environmental footprint and increase their quality of life. The long-term aim of the program is to support community resilience and potentially to support workforce development. So that's the background around the program. And with the next slide, just to give you some of the results today. We started the outreach in May, June. We sent letters to every single household in the target neighborhoods, which were Kitely and Lumila. So we did that twice. We had a nice response from houses, and we also had some good response for people wanting to be volunteers. So we received 16 applications for volunteers to actually participate in the program, interviewed 12, recruited and trained 4 volunteers who have been active with us since late August. We visited 11 homes. So we've conducted 11 home visits. And this obviously has been compliant with Boulder County public health guidelines in relationship to COVID. We've a very positive response from all the houses that we visited, and everybody's very happy to put yard signs indicating that they've had the visit, and then to let their neighbors know. So that is building out as well. We met the Boulder County funding requirements at the end of August, and 2 of our volunteers have moved on. One has moved out of state, and the other one has just backed off for health reasons. And so we did initiate a little bit of a drive, and we recruited 3 more volunteers. So we feel as though that's helping to maintain the program. And the idea is that, we're going to connect with households in the spring as well. So these weren't one-off visits. The idea is to actually build household connection on an ongoing basis. And the houses that we visited are very receptive to that. We have funding for this for next year within the city budget. We're not applying for sustainability tax funding for this for 2021. So if you go to the next slide. Oh yes, so my token photos. I'm sorry, it's not quite as pretty as Debbie's presentation, but hopefully informative all the same. So that's our team. Wayne, I'm sorry about this, but there you are. He's training 2 of our volunteers. We had Soul branded t-shirts, and you can see some of the tools and upgrade devices that we were taking to each household for those visits. Each visit took about an hour and a half at the most. And you can see one of the signs that we put in Kitely Park. And I know this one worked because one of our householders told us that they went up to the sign, took a photo of it, Googled it, and find out that the program was legitimate, and contacted us. So the marketing and outreach has also worked. So next slide, please. The Sustainable Neighborhood Solutions. So this is the second project that's funded by the 2020 Sustainability Tax. So this has a $25,000 allocation. As I mentioned, it's a multi-tier, multi-year program, and we've started with the Neighborhood Impact Granting Program, which I know, James, you're familiar with. This was launched this year in the summer. The aim is to, again, engage residents with local sustainability efforts, really building up from the grassroots and capacity building so that we have an impact on reducing our greenhouse gas emissions in the long term. And Wayne is going to be able to speak to you in more detail about this, as I've only been involved in a periphery level. If you can go to the next slide. So some of the outcomes: soft launch in the summer. We launched the Neighborhood Impact Granting Program. We had 4 application cycles, 6 applications received, and we awarded 4. These are an example of the 4 programs, varying levels of funding: a water conservation and rain barrel webinar, a shared vegetable garden for $10,000. And then for those who attended the webinar, they're getting support with a rain barrel installation and a pollinator garden. So that leaves another $10,000. So this of unspent funds, and Boulder County has kindly allowed us to roll that forward into the next quarter of 2021, which as an exception, because I know that essentially all funds should be spent within the calendar year that the funds are allocated. So we appreciate this flexibility given the COVID impact. So we will be able to allocate the remaining $10,000 by the end of the next quarter. It needs to be spent down. Next slide. And again, Wayne will be able to speak to this more if you have any questions. The Carbon-Free Equitable Transportation Roadmap. This is the 4th program funded by the tax. So we go to the next slide. So essentially we hired consultants to carry this project out. So there's a $40,000 allocation for this. The idea was for them to provide a roadmap to help us the city meet the transportation greenhouse gas reduction goals. And to do this by providing a report with clear policies, programs, budgets, and timelines with an equitable approach to implementation across the city. So that's the brief. And in terms of outcomes to date, next slide, please, Heather. So we hired the consultant, SRD Consulting, in April with subcontracts with Brendel Group and AMBG Consulting. They had the difficult task of conducting community outreach, obviously, when the height of COVID was hitting us. So they had to adapt their plans of in-person outreach, but they were successful in conducting surveys. They had almost 200 survey responses, interviews on the street, and key informant interviews. Following the community input, they delivered a first draft in August and then a second draft, and that draft is now with city staff who are finalizing and consolidating the report. So we expect that to be presented to City Council next year. And again, Francie Jaffe, and I believe Anne Lutz is also here, and Annie, who may be able to speak more to this if you're interested. So the next program, this one I'm afraid I know the least about because I have been least involved with this one, the Women, Infants and Children's Farmers Market Program. Go ahead, Heather. So this is, again, it's a program offered by Boulder County, operating in numerous municipalities, including Longmont. So we supported this effort with our 2020 sustainability tax dollars. And again, it's supporting individuals who have food security, and we're supporting local farmers. And these are some of the outcomes on the next slide. This is taken from the WICS report to Boulder County. So I do not have any results from last year because we obviously were not funding the program last year, but they can see the impact of COVID. They had to implement COVID measures. They introduced contactless curbside pickup and standing orders, but they've served a lot of families, up to 950 people this year. So these are cumulative totals, and they've distributed 11,500 double up. Sorry, I don't know the acronym. Double up food bucks, and the WIC bucks, $34,000 worth of WIC bucks. So they have been very successful, even in the light of COVID. And they've had families wanting standing home deliveries going through to the end of the year. So in light of COVID, it's still been impactful and important for our local community. And although we are not applying for funding through the sustainability tax this year, we will be looking at our budget in January of 2021 and seeing if we have any internal city budget to support the Longmont effort, because I'm aware that this was something that was of particular interest to the Sustainability Advisory Board at our last meeting. So we want to take that into account and see if we can continue to support that going forward. So that's my summary. Thank you. It was a lot of information. And please, if you have any questions.
Who has questions?
I guess I'll ask one question. Thanks, Atra. That was a very nice update. Appreciate that. I'm curious about for the grant application process, how much of that is, do you go out and identify opportunities and then maybe look for potential partners to put the grants together versus how many people or how many groups come to us to partner with us? I'm just wondering about that process of how we come up with, or how you come up with the opportunities to go after.
Absolutely. At the moment, it's been quite responsive. So teams within the city have said, we're trying to apply for this, can you help? So it's been quite a responsive process at the moment. I think as we go into 2021 and we have more systems in place and my familiarity with the different departments and grant opportunities increases, then I intend to be more proactive to actually reach out to project managers, say, did you know about this grant opportunity? So it's a work in progress, but a very good question. And we want to go in that direction.
And sounds good. One simple follow-up. Are there opportunities to resubmit the ones that are declined, for example, using the feedback and iterating, adjusting them to be more responsive to the interests of the agency, et cetera? Sometimes it's a lot easier to revise a proposal than it is to start one from scratch. And some agencies have ongoing calls for proposals that you can respond to annually, for example.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure there are. In the instance of GoCo, for instance, we did submit 2. So the first one was declined, and we took part of that with the feedback that was provided to us to form the next application. And so we are optimistic that the second application will be successful. But I think it's on a case-by-case basis with the agencies in terms of reapplying if you've been declined. But we did do that in the case of the GoCo application. And also, actually, on that note, I know that Danielle Levine is taking the substance of the application that she submitted in May to the Colorado State Forestry Service and applying for a new grant, which is better aligned. So she's taking our needs and fitting it with better criteria for the funding agency. So I think we're going to be more successful there too.
Got it. Great. Thank you.
Other questions? Okay. Atra, thanks so much for that presentation. That was very informative.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay. Other business, I don't think there's any there, but we do have an item for this from the staff, climate action progress report. Annie, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm hoping my internet holds up. You guys have been fading in and out, and I had several issues last night when I was waiting to present at council. Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, so as you guys are aware, we brought the Climate Action Task Force recommendations to City Council in August, and we were directed to do a cost-benefit analysis, and we presented the criteria that we use, I think it was last month, to the Sustainability Board, along with the different weighting scenarios, and you weighed in on the weighting scenarios. We took that information and we were hoping to present it last night at Council. And it was a long meeting, and at 10:40, we were the next item up, and they decided that they didn't really have the energy to hear our presentation. So we are going back to City Council, hopefully on December 1st. We were going to present the Climate Action Task Force recommendation evaluation, also the greenhouse gas evaluation, and or the greenhouse gas inventory, and the solar feasibility study last night as well, which those are two presentations that the Sustainability Board has already seen. So what we were planning to present last night to Council was the different criteria and the weighting, and then our recommendations in implementation. And if you could go back one slide, Heather, sorry. So after doing the weighting and looking at the different, there were 27 actions that the Climate Action Task Force recommended, and a variety of staff weighed in. We looked at the evaluation using a scoring of those 7 criteria that were presented last month, and then we weighted them. These are the recommendations that have come to, the near-term implementation period, have risen to the top of things that we should work on in the next year or two. We're starting these efforts. And so what's shown in green is are things that we have funding for already. And I might get this wrong. What's shown in yellow, I think, is funded in the 2021 budget. The items in blue, in the light blue, are funds that we're requesting through the Boulder County Sustainability Tax for the 2021 budget year. And then the ones that are not colored have not been funded yet. So these are the near-term recommendations. And I wanted to show this to you, not only to let you know the outcome of that evaluation, but also for you to keep in mind. The next slide, we're going to talk about the 2020 work plan and the items that you've seen this year. But there's no meeting next month. And as I understand it, in January, we're going to start the conversation about the 2021 work plan for the Sustainability Board. And I think there's real value in looking at the work that is going to City Council and how you could weigh in and be advisory in those efforts. I think there are a lot of things that might have been on the not a lot, but several things that have been on the 2020 work plan for the Sustainability Board this year that we didn't get to. But I think there were a lot of things that we had the opportunity to present to you as a board and for you to weigh in. And then we were able to take that feedback and bring those presentations to City Council and have meaningful discussions. So, there's the solar feasibility study, the greenhouse gas inventory, the Habitat for Humanity project. These are projects that are happening citywide, not just that sustainability staff are taking the lead on. The equitable carbon-free transportation roadmap, which we're bringing forward to this board, hopefully in January, and then to council in February. So I just, want to put that in the back of your head, that there's a lot of things that are being worked on that's related to climate, related to other things citywide. And I see real value in this board weighing in on those efforts as we bring them to council. So it would be helpful when we have this conversation in January that you keep that in the back of your mind about how could we help inform council with recommendations on things that are on council's work plan and on city staff's work plan. And so I just, want to keep that in the back of your mind. So we could look at the 2020 work plan. Maybe Heather, you want to bring that up just as a reminder of the things. And this was very early on. I think we had the conversation. We knew that the climate action emergency declaration had happened. We knew that there was a climate action task force at the beginning of the year. We didn't know the outcome of the recommendations of that task force, but we knew that that information was going to be coming to the Sustainability Board and that we would want your input. We got your input before we went to the August 25th meeting. We got input from other boards as well, the Transportation Board, the LDDA. So I think this year there was quite a bit of work and input from this group on that effort. Next year, we have funding for the update of the sustainability plan. And one of the recommendations that we had in our update to council last night was that we want to embed the Climate Action Task Force recommendations into the sustainability plan. So that will be part of that update. There was an item that was planned for education and outreach, and I don't know the origin of this request to put it on the agenda, but I think there's been a lot of education and outreach embedded in a lot of the work we've been doing. So, for example, the Equitable Carbon-Free Transportation Roadmap had outreach, the SOUL program had outreach, and I think we've reported in on those things as we report in on the specific project. So I'm sorry, I don't know specifically what the board was looking for in the topic education and outreach. It's a very broad topic, but that was on the agenda. Recycling and composting, we are planning, staff is planning to go to City Council in December to do what's called, I guess, a white paper on the Waste Services division. Bob Allen's going to be giving that presentation. Francie is going to be talking about the life cycle costs evaluation that she presented to this group. That's going to be part of the presentation on the waste services program in general. We'll be getting feedback from council at that meeting. And, you know, one of the Climate Action Task Force recommendations was related to, I think, composting. And so that's one aspect of that program, the waste services program. So that's likely to be something that's on, you know, it's in the near term recommendations and something that we'll be working on as a city staff. So recycling and composting, while it was something, I guess, that was on our work plan for this year to discuss, I think it's going to be something that is of higher priority next year. The Citizens Climate Lobby, Jenny Black was going to speak to you today on that, and you heard that's been delayed to early next year. Water efficiency was also, I think, on the agenda, and I think, again, that's something that as staff is working on updating plans, it would probably be more appropriate to get input on rather than just having it as a general topic, but that's up for discussion. And then there was this pesticides and pollinators, which is really not something that is necessarily in the Climate Action Task Force recommendations specifically. It is something that staff can give an update on. I don't know that there's any particular program that focuses on that we're currently working on, but I know it is something that the Natural Resources Group has involvement in. Electrification and renewables is embedded in a lot of the work in LPC, the distributed energy evaluation that they're doing with Platte River Power Authority. There could likely be an update on the progress on the Habitat for Humanity project. And this, you know, equitable carbon-free transportation roadmap, you know, looks at electrification to some extent. So as you know, the December meeting, I guess it's not, we don't typically have a December meeting. In January, there'll be a discussion about the work plan. I just kind of wanted to plant the seed about upcoming things that are happening, and we'll bring that information back to you in January. And then I also mentioned, I think at the last meeting, that it seems like there's a lot of information that we're trying to present. Today we had, I think, a good level of discussion, and we were able to really get into some of the details, but we had less on the agenda, and I think that worked out really well. But you might want to think about whether an hour and a half meeting is long enough or not, given the, you know, things on the agenda, or maybe we need to think about putting less on the agenda. But sometimes we're trying to get things in front of this board before we get it in front of council. And so, for example, like the Equitable Carbon-Free Transportation Roadmap, we're trying to bring that to council early next year, and we'd like to bring it to this board. We'd like it to bring it to the Transportation Board, you know, several boards. And so we have to line things up. And so sometimes we have to move things around in the agenda. So wanted to plant that seed as well. Is an hour and a half enough? And just kind of put that out there. So That's my update. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have about any of that information.
Yeah, thanks for the update, Annie. Adam, I see your hand.
Yeah, I appreciate the update. I had a question on the Climate Action Task Force recommendations. For that list that you presented, was that in any sort of ranked order, or are they merely just grouped items?
They're grouped. And
Okay.
Those are all items that staff is really, most of them we're already working on. And staff did go and look at all the recommendations of the Climate Action Task Force. And when I say staff, I mean a broad range of staff, not just sustainability staff or environmental services staff. And some of those recommendations were modified, and Francie could go into greater detail about them, but they're modified slightly to be more implementable. So maybe Francie, you could give some examples of some of the recommendations that we made as far as modifications to the task force recommendations.
Yeah, and I don't think this was on this slide, but near term, for those 12 recommendations, we're recommending implementation begin in the next 2 years. So some, as Annie mentioned, have already begun implementation, but the couple that haven't, staff is recommending in either next year or the year after that. And so that's for beginning implementation. The recommendations will vary on how long it will take to fully implement. For examples on how they were, the example I'm actually going to give to council when we present to them in the future is one of the ones that's in that top 12 that was actually ranked lower is commercial and residential composting. So that one actually had some more extensive staff modifications because staff found that the intent of the recommendation was helpful. As you all, I probably remember from our waste life cycle analysis, you can reduce greenhouse gas emissions through waste diversion. But the actual action items were less implementable. They were more expensive, less feasible. So to try to increase waste diversion, staff are recommending the city council pursue different action items. There were some different ones recommended in the modification, but also adding waste diversion overall. The recommendation focused on composting specifically, and specifically directed city council to look towards the white paper that will be presented on December 1st from our waste services department. So that was an example of a more kind of extensive modification that kind of was like, the intent is great, but let's shift the action items. Why there are some like modifications were as simple as the timeline doesn't work, please adjust it by 1 year. Like for the Sustainable Liaison Program, it was supposed to start in September 2020. That is not very feasible as we're just getting it started. But we wanted to just make a note that the timeline should shift to reflect when things are being passed.
Great, thank you. Other questions? Okay. Thanks so much, Annie. Appreciate the update.
You're welcome.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is items from the board, and I actually have one. So I was able to get a sneak peek of a video that Recycle Colorado did, and we have a star among us, and so I want that Heather is going to play that for us. Thanks, Heather.
Hey Longmont, what's something you do every day that's good for your makes our town stand apart from others? We recycle. Thanks to you, Longmont is increasing our recycling rate, but we can do even better. Once you know what to recycle, it becomes second nature. Remember, our city's recycling program accepts paper, cardboard, cans, glass, water bottles, and more. Every time you recycle, you give new life to that material. For example, your recycled glass jars and bottles get crushed and processed into new glass bottles right here in Colorado in just a matter of weeks. When you recycle, you're helping create new jobs for fellow Coloradans. We know that when Coloradans are not working, we like to get out into nature. Recycling helps protect our outdoors by keeping our environment clean. which conserves water and energy, reducing the need to extract raw materials. While we all consider Colorado to be a green state, the surprising truth is that Colorado recycles at only 17%, while the rest of the US recycles double the amount we do. We can do better.
Hi, Longmont. As mayor, I commend you for helping us keep Longmont a beautiful place to live and a community that respects our environment. We're proud to be one of the few cities in Colorado to offer curbside recycling for single-family homes. The actions you take today to reduce, reuse, and recycle help our city live up to its potential and to serve as a leader in Colorado. Thank you for recycling right and making recycling second nature to protect nature.
Let's do Colorado proud and recycle today for a better tomorrow. This message is brought to you by Recycle Colorado, the Coca-Cola Foundation, and the City of Longmont.
Yeah, I've updated my IMDb already, so.
Awesome.
Are you a member of the Screen Actors Guild now?
Yeah, that's where I get my health insurance now.
Well, thanks for humoring me on that. Well done, Jim.
Well, it was about 40 minutes of filming for those 3 little shots. So
Wow.
that was quite interesting.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
I like the music that they chose to put to it. It was like
Very
snappy.
boppy. Yeah.
It looks like the same video footage that are part of it that they showed last night about Dickens Park.
Apparently, they said that they took shots that included, like, our garbage cans have the Longmont logo on them. They also had to take some that didn't have that because they're apparently going to use the exact same video for like Louisville and like 3 other cities and just pretend that it's Longmont.
That's funny. And you're going to be in all of them.
I told them I wanted a full head of hair in post-production, but they didn't listen to me.
So how did you specifically get involved in that?
Heather sent around an email, and
It was a request from Francie who wanted to be
Yeah.
involved, and Jim was the one who replied.
after a week, I wondered if anybody had applied, and nobody had. So
He said, "Hey, you're on."
I know I miss all the like outreach opportunities we used to do, where I'd hang out and tell people about things. So it was fun.
Great. Well done. Thanks for doing that to increase recycling in our state. Okay. With no council members here, I assume we have no items from them. And the next last item is that there are informational attachments to our board packet, and they are just for you to review. And with that, we're at the end of the meeting. Would anybody like to make a motion to adjourn?
I'll move to adjourn.
I'll second that.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 10 minutes early. Well done.
Thank you all.
Thank
Have
you.
a great Thanksgiving.
Yes,
Yeah.
well.
Thank
And
you.
New Year by the time we see each other.
Yes,
Yeah,
we'll see you in
exactly.
January.
Yeah, happy
That's
holidays.
right.
Stay safe, everybody.
All
Take
right.
care.
Thank you. Okay,
Bye.
bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.